Okay, let me just see. I'm going to mute everyone for a minute. Right, okay, so we are on. That's good. Right, okay, so last week then what we were doing was we were doing some gesture drawing but using inks. So it's quite rapid fire pace stuff, and also, you know, kind of a little bit scary in a sense, really, because I just got you to water down the inks, look at the tonal qualities of the images that you were working from, and then perhaps working back over with line or charcoal and things. So we did that last week. This week, as a few of you have mentioned, we've got together some art. I got together some artworks with colouring because I'd like to start working with acrylic paints today. The thing with acrylic paints is that it's very flexible. You can do a lot of things with your acrylic paints. You can use them as kind of watercolors. You can use them in an impasto way, which means really thick textured paint. You can also layer the colours on top of each other very easily too, because the colours dry really quickly. The paints dry really quickly. So as soon as that's dry, properly dry that is, you can't do much with it. So you need to layer the colours on top of each other. So it gives you a chance really to build layers on top of each other. So you can do that a little bit with watercolor, but with this one, if something goes wrong with acrylics, you can paint over it. So in that sense, it's quite forgiving as well. So we're going to be looking at some techniques using acrylic paints. So there are a number of artworks on the website. Now, one thing I wanted to do as well was look at color and the moods that colors can create and how to choose those colors as well. So we're going to be looking at things like harmonious colours and opposite colours and using those within the same pictures. This is why I've chosen quite a few images that are very colourful for you to have a look at today. However, what I've done is I've taken one of the previous images that we've used. So this is a statue of a girl, and I've used colours that I've been inspired from another more modern and very colourful artwork. So I'll show you that in a few minutes. Basically though, you can work in any way that you choose. So you could just copy one of the paintings I put on this week, or you could work over one of the previous drawings that you've done if you're not too precious about it. Or you could take another photograph, draw that first, and then paint onto that one. Okay, but I'll show you what I've done and you can see what you think, and then try that out, and I'll show you a couple of little bits on acrylic paints as well. All right, so I'll go over to the wall. Right, okay, so here's what we did last week, just over here, where I looked at a Rembrandt and I copied that very quickly, and then after that I did a few other things. So a few people today at class were thinking, well, I learned how to do this last week. I want to just go for it and draw out my figure because I know that I can do it a bit more now. So you might choose to use pencils to quickly draw out a figure that you want to work from. Okay, you might choose, of course, to use a grid, which we've used in the first couple of lessons. I showed you how to use a grid to draw up your figure so you get it all correct the first time. Okay, so you might choose to do that. Now, here's the old colour wheel up here. There's hundreds of different types of colour wheel. When you go on the internet and you search for it, you'll find there's loads and loads of different types and ways of using colour or looking at colour using a colour wheel. But this one's quite good because you've got a whole range of colours on here. All right, now over here are my starting points really for the work that I've been doing today. So on this one, the interesting thing is we've got all these lovely blues and purples on the inside just over here, and some pinks and things as well, and then we can see on the color wheel that those colours are quite close to each other in relationship. So you've got the blues, the pinky sorts of colours around here, and a couple of pastel-y sorts of bits in there with the turquoisey flowers on her dress as well. There are little bits of orange in there too, and opposite to blue and orange, they're opposite each other on the colour wheel, so that means they're going to stand out and be kind of a bit zingy and stuff, and draw your attention because of the contrast in there. So as I was saying, opposite colours really make things stand out. So you've got this lovely yellow, a deep kind of golden yellow in the background, and that is very contrasty of course with the purple on her dress and some of the blues. So it really makes things stand out and look kind of interesting, which is why I've chosen some different images like that for you to work from today. This is the other one. Now I started off on the painting that I'm going to show you in a second with this lovely sort of lemon yellow, and then I put yellow ochre on top, and I've scratched into the paint while it was still wet to get some interesting marks. And that idea came from looking at this. So obviously most of this is brush strokes, but I've taken this idea of putting movement in the picture, a bit like we did last week, but using the butt or the end of a brush to create that as well. And again, we've got these greens and yellows and oranges in the background. So greens, yellows and oranges are very close to each other. And then we've got a few blues accents in the center which draw your attention to the girl and things in the middle. So you can see how the colors are sort of bouncing off each other, but ultimately they've got a really nice relationship on the page for the painting as well. Okay, so on my desk I haven't put the camera on, so let me just put the camera on. I knew I'd forget that. Right, is it going to work? No, it's not going to work. Oh, there you go. Hey, there we go. It's doing something. There we go. Right, sorry about that. Right, so this is what we were doing last week. So we've got all those expressive marks. You can use some of those techniques on the work we're doing today. This is the picture that I've worked from. So if you remember, I said that I was going to work from something that had a picture that we previously had on the internet. I've chosen here to work from in this lesson. I've been inspired by these paintings over here to get this sense of contrast and colour into the image, and so this is what I've done so far from that picture. So I'll zoom out a little bit or come out a little bit from there. So on here I've used a large flat brush, which is still in my box, so I'm going to get a small, I'll get this one out, there we go. So I've got this is more of a filbert actually, but I've got a large brush anyway to put acrylic over the whole of my A3 page here. You don't have to go for A3, you can go small, you can go A4 if you want to. So I've used lemon yellow underneath, and then I put the yellow ochre over the top just after it had dried a bit, and used the back of my brush to scratch the surface and create these lovely marks that you can see. And a bit later on during the day I've also scratched, put some greens in here, a bit like the picture up the top here. So I thought that'd be quite nice to use a bit of green on there. So you can see this one over here, I've used, there's green in the background on that one. So I've been doing the same sort of thing here and scratching back and layering the paint on the surface as well. So with acrylic paint, as I said to you before, it dries quite quickly, so it is important to use a little bit of water to help the paint flow better, but also to help you blend it and to keep it going for as long as you can before it dries out. So I'll do a little blend on the back of my sheet, and you can see a couple that I've already done on there. So a simple blend, what you'll need is to get one colour, and I suggest if you haven't used acrylics much before, have a little practice, or if you're feeling a bit rusty, have a little practice. It's good practice to get you into the feel of the paint. So I've just added a little bit of water to, not much because we're not using watercolours, remember, just using acrylic paint. So add a little bit of water to your paint. And then start off by doing a strip. I'll come in a bit closer for this as well. There we go. Just come up there a bit. So while the paint's wet, you then get your other colour that you want to use. I'm just going to use a little bit of white, and you put the white next to the bit of blue that you've got on the plate. You may need to add a touch of water. That's literally just dipping the end of the brush into the water, and then you start just a bit away from where you were before, and then brush in, and then you start again and mix a bit more white onto your palette like so, and while it's still wet, put that down and blend it through so you get a nice smooth blend, and you can keep going like that as long as you want. So that's the basic principle of how to get your colours to merge into each other as you're working, really. So as I said to you, it is worth having a little practice at doing that so you get the hang of it. So the paint will be so a few people who use watercolors today, they were using just a little bit of the paint and then adding loads of water. So if you add loads of water to your paint, you'll end up with a thin watercolory kind of effect. So something like this, you can see how watery that is. You can use the paint like this as well. If we look at this blend here that I did today, and I apply colour, this watery colour over the top of it, you can see it creates what I call kind of a nice glaze. So you can actually tone down areas of your paint as you work. Okay, so you can add a little bit of a glazed colour to it. If you've already got colour on the surface of the picture, you can paint over it. So if I get hold of a little bit of this blue and I put that down, and I want to blend this colour, then what you can do is add a little bit of water, and you can start blending it by just diluting the paint on the surface as you go along. And I recommend having a little tissue or a paper towel or something to blot off your brush as you work. But as you can see, because I've got the colour underneath, I'm able to blend that as well. So essentially, using acrylics is a lot about layering the paint on top of each other in order to get the different effects that we're looking for. Okay, so that's a simple blend. And as I said a second ago, please give it a little bit of a try. And I'll do a little bit on here now. Where's she gone? She's gone off. Put down my girl. There she is. So here I'm using a very, very small, actually it's probably a little bit too small. I'm using a round brush to paint the girl over here. And this part of the robe that she's wearing is very light. So I'm going to start with you could almost just start with white and add a little bit of colour to it. Let's just zoom back out again slightly. There we go. So going to get some white and add a little bit of blue, and then to begin with you can paint quite loosely with your colours, because remember, even if you put your colour down you can paint back over the top of it. So it's a little bit like the gesture in a way that we did last week, in that you can be quite loose about how you apply the colour, because you can come back and layer back over the top of it a little bit later. So you're just looking for the main shadows and shapes, and then you can build into it. So I've just put down this bit of blue next to the white just here, so I'm going to blend that now. I'll get a little bit more white. Doesn't necessarily need blending this bit, but I'm going to do it to show you. So while the paint's wet, it's going to be easier to blend it. If the paint's damp, it will come up, but not everywhere. So keep adding a little bit of water to your brush to keep things going. And go back to where you had your paint on your palette and pick it up and bring it back in, and you'll still soon learn to understand how it all works if you've not done it before. So I've not put a lot of detail on this part of her robe at the moment. I put some tones in around the front here because there's a little bit just here as well, but you can see there's quite a lot of detail still to add, and I'll do that as I continue to add more layers of paint. So the face down here, I've added quite a few layers to get to this stage, and I want to do some more around the mouth and so forth, because it's quite a thin line around here at the moment, and around here we've got much more shadow in there, so I'll be doing that a little bit more as we continue. All right, so what you can do then is, as I said before, you can choose one of the paintings that we had online and work from those, draw those out first of all. You could work from one of these photographs that I brought in before and make it into a contemporary painting from the inspiration I put online. You could work on one of your previous drawings, and if you don't want to work on it but you'd like to work on it, then you can photocopy it onto some cartridge paper as well, and that's quite a quick way of doing it. What I did for this one is I used a light box, and I just shoved it behind my paper and traced through, so I just got very quickly the outlines. I did also then use a biro pen to add in some tonal areas just to sort of get started and to show people how to do that as well. So there we are. So has anyone got any questions about any of that at the moment? You're all on mute, by the way, so if you've got a question, unmute.
Jamie,
yeah,
on this one, would you put a pale burnt umber one all the way through underneath it?
Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Replace pin. Yeah, you could do, because it's quite a warm, even that grey in the background on the screen anyway looks quite
it's got like a peachy colour coming through it.
Yeah, so you could go for the burnt umber, couldn't you? Not burnt umber, sorry, yellow ochre would probably be quite good, maybe.
Okay,
yeah, with a bit of burnt umber combined, it'd be quite nice. Yeah. Any other questions at the moment?
On this one then, Jamie, that's the one I'm going to choose.
Oh, is this the same as the one I've got here?
Yeah. Which is lovely, love the colours.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
For later on, where they've got it looks as if the paint has run.
Yes.
They've added that at the start.
I suspect, yeah, I think that the artist, and we were talking about this as well today, how artists often start off really rigorously, you know, they slap the colour down and they're quite loose and expressive and gestural about it as well. I think that where that orange bit is concerned and a few other areas, that the paint was applied quite liberally and loosely to begin with, and then the detail honed in on later. So a lot of artists will do that. They need to sort of break the ice with the surface and apply the paint really loosely. A bit like we did last week, we applied all the tones quite loosely, didn't we, to begin with, and then we started to hone in on some of the finer details. So it's a bit like that,
So
essentially.
isn't it better to do the background colours first, then do the drawing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's what I did with this one, which is what I think you should do as well. Is let me just get that down again. So yeah, I started by doing the background, and then this morning I drew the girl, and then I did a bit of biro on it, and then I started to paint it today. So that's a good way to do it. Some people in lessons today, what they did is they drew the figure out first, made sure it's a little bit darker so it comes through the paint really clearly, and then when they've drawn it, paint over the surface, you know, cover the page. So you can do it either way really, but whatever you're most comfortable with. The thing to remember about applying your main color as well is that you know, you don't have to add you don't have to have, I mean, you can add a bit more water so you can spread the paint over the surface a bit more easily, if you see what I'm saying. Okay. The color that we're using in the background, you want to have something that's in the middle, like a mid-tone. You don't want a color that's got too much white or too much black or too dark or too light. If you start with something that's in the middle, like this one is, then what you've got there is a mid-tone, or a color at least, that then, you know, you'll be able to see the whites that you paint on and the darks. The lights and the darks will show up really well on the color, if you see what I mean, that you put behind. So you get the benefit of seeing the highlights and the shadows appearing as you paint them, because you've got kind of a mid-ground color on the surface to begin with. Okay? Quite a long answer, that one. Anyone else?
Could I just ask a question about the colours?
Yes?
So the reason those two paintings that you showed us look so fabulous
Yep.
is because of the colours that they've chosen, and they've chosen those because of the wheel.
Yeah, yes. Well, I would say they had an understanding of color theory, which is what this is about essentially. So you've got, you know, you've got harmonious colors for the most part on her dress, haven't you?
Yeah.
On this one, and then
Yeah, that's the one I'm doing.
yeah, and then in the background you've got this brilliant yellow, which contrasts with yellowy orange, that contrasts well with the blues and especially the purples. So it's got this vivid sort of quality to it, hasn't it? That really makes you look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how does putting purple on her hair and her face, how do you get away with that when it, you know, isn't really there, but it looks fab?
Well, you know, this is it. This is where your artistic license comes in and your expression, and you know, you want it to feel a certain way. So, you know, and you kind of want the whole, I suppose in this case, the whole figure, the head, the dress, her arms, are all part of the same thing. But if you look at her head as well, there is kind of this really dark brown on most of it. It's darker, isn't it? With a little highlight of the colour in it as well. So it kind of links well to the dress. And a little bit on her face. Look, she's got purple there on her face too. So
how do you stop her looking like she's been beaten up? You know, and it's not a big bruise. That's what I don't understand.
Well, some people might say she looks like she's got a bruise on the side of her face, but when you look at the whole picture, you don't see it, do you?
You don't notice it.
You see what you see is kind of the feeling, I suppose, of how the picture feels, don't you? You know,
it's a shadow.
Sorry? Yeah, like it's a shadow, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's, you know, she's in this golden light, or you know, she's in this state of mind or something like that. Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
What?
So lovely.
Yeah, sorry. What kind of yellow would you use on that one?
On this one? So I would, well, yeah, on the picture that I've made here, which isn't quite the same obviously, but I used yellow ochre and lemon yellow, but you could also use cadmium yellow on there as well. You know, combine those, but there's a lot of white in there too. The top half of the picture is lighter than the bottom half too, isn't it? You can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those colours would be a good place to start. But don't forget what I said earlier, you can build up successive layers of colour to get to where you want to. In fact, if we go even further than that and look at the bottom corner of the picture, you can see there's a dark colour underneath the whole thing. Can't you?
Oh.
See that?
Yeah.
So there's a purple underneath already.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we've got the yellows, and it creates this kind of layered effect, doesn't it? It gives it more depth as well. So
I think the artist put a purple background on and then decided that was a big mistake.
well, you always get, you know, if you put one color on top of another, you're going to get these colors coming through unless you really put the paint on. So I mean, even like, I don't know if we can see it on the screen here, but on this girl just here, you can see she's got yellow coming through on her face.
Yeah.
And that's because that's the yellow underneath the painting, and I've left that on purpose because I quite liked it, you know, but I could equally obliterate it and paint over the whole thing and make it all the same, if you see what I mean. Okay, so lots of fun to have with this picture here. I wanted to do something quite expressive towards the end, although I'm working very tightly at the moment on this picture of this statue that I found. Also, a bit further down, you'll see me working on, in a few minutes, you'll see me working on the robes that she's wearing there, and I was really interested in just trying to get a bit of the texture of the folds and stuff of the fabric. Managed to achieve that on the sleeves, that's just above there. Here I'm just building in gradually layers of colour, and the thing is about this is I notice more about it as I work on it, or things that I've missed or things that I need to improve and work over. As I was saying with acrylics, you can keep working back over the acrylics to achieve something closer to what you're aiming for. So I also knew that as I was going to work down the body here, I wanted to sort of fade out the robes so that your attention is drawn more and more to her face, which I think it would be anyway, but I quite like the idea of it turning into something quite expressive and with these big brush strokes and so forth appearing on there as well. So I'm hopping between different parts of the picture here. I did say to everyone, work on one particular area at a time and build that up, which is what I've done previously. But once you've got some paint on the surface, you can hop around a little bit more when you notice things need just altering or changing. The thing about the colour scheme that we've got here, and I wanted to emphasise, is that we're using a simple colour theme here, or a colour palette. So there's not too much complexity in the way that we're applying the colour. The only complexity, I suppose, being is the fact that we're coming back to different areas and layering back over the top. But we've got a very simple palette, so it allows us to just use what we've got in front of us and concentrating on what details we want to put into the picture. So I've got these lovely indigo blue and purple colour, and some white is almost everything that I've got in here. to create this picture. So you can see how I've added more and more details onto the robes. I think I could have spent longer on the robes, but I just enjoyed doing a bit of blending, adding a little bit of the texture in there as well before I move on down to the next part. So you can see here, I do tend to find that if you use, if you find sort of middle tone sort of color to work with when you're using this simple, almost mono color palette, if you use a middle tone, then it gives you a reference point in which to go into the darker colors and go back into the lighter colors as you're working. And then always refer back to that mid-tone to help you stay on track. So here somebody asked me about how to use the colours, and I've talked about warm colours too, and how there's a little bit of green just in the side there, but I've got this lovely warm colour palette, and you can see how all those colours are next to each other on the colour wheel and create these lovely harmonies between each other, but often there we've got a conflict, you know, an opposite colour in there as well. So in a little while I'll start to apply some more of these expressive marks, but I'm just moving down a bit further onto the robes. I think she's wearing a kind of almost looks like an apron on the front there, so you'll see me in a little while. There it is. I just cover, this is not quite on screen, but I do just cover that whole area of the apron with kind of a lighter tone or a lighter tint of colour. And then I work back, there you go, I'll work back into some of the dark areas and then go back in and add some of the lighter bits on top. So as I was saying, you can just keep building the colour and layering areas on top of each other. You notice sometimes I go back to the top area of the robe as well. I've added in some of the shadows just underneath the bit that folds over, probably where there's some string or rope or something, or a belt perhaps holding the robes in place around her waist. So yeah, a lot of fun getting all of that in. Here you see now I'm starting to think I want to get a bit more kind of expressive with the mark, so I've put down a layer of purple on here and scratched it away, or scratched parts of it away, and then I start to say, right, there's lighter tones in here, so I'm noticing some of the details in here, but I'm not being as overly precious as I was before about adding in too much detail, because I want to sort of relax a little bit as we go down to the bottom to draw the eye up towards the top a bit more. There we go. And then we're just coming down the robe, so I'm being quite loose about it, and you can do this even if you're going to be a bit more precious later on. If you just keep looking at where the tones and shadows and the highlights are and just keep applying them on top of each other, eventually you'll start to hone in on specific detail and it will all come together a bit more. So now I'm being quite expressive and quite loose and using more sweeping marks on here. I'm still looking at the robe in the photograph, but I'm not worrying too much about being so precise. I'm quite enjoying making these marks a little bit more looser and expressive. So here we go. Starting to apply some of the greens. So this is inspired by the painting on the top right hand side, and I've got these nice turquoises coming through, and I'm not seriously thinking too much about everything here. I'm just seeing what happens with the color, and I do like this idea that the background can emphasize certain areas on the figure itself that you might want to get your viewer to look at. So I've darkened down the bottom there, I've added green around the back, and as I was working there I just thought, it'd be quite nice to have, to have someone look towards the back there. So I'm just talking a little bit about that just there,
and I've painted in some nice yellows and a little wash, so a thinner glaze of colour at the top. I started to think, well, you know, I like the way the marks kind of hover or sweep around the figure. And then I was thinking of how maybe angels or saints have like a halo, a little bit in the back of my mind. And I keep scratching away areas too. There we go, emphasizing the side of a face by putting some light coming from behind there. And here I was using some pinks, which you can't see as clearly on the picture just here, but yeah, the pinks just to add some contemporary looking accents to the work that I've already done. So quite pleased with that. I've got some areas sweeping over the front of the figure as well, some marks, but yeah, pretty pleased with that effort. I may do a bit more next week, but I think I'm looking forward to doing something new as well. So thank you very much and have a lovely week, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.